All right, we're back with another movie review, and this time we're doing Killing Zoe, which is written and directed by Roger Avary, who was kind of he must have been Quentin Tarantino's buddy because he worked on as a writer on like True Romance that Quentin Tarantino wrote. He was co-writer on Pulp Fiction. He wrote some of Reservoir Dogs. Apparently, according to what I read for Killing Zoe, while they were scouting locations for Reservoir Dogs, they looked at this bank and the producer Lawrence Bender was like, "Oh wow, this bank looks like so cool. We should do a whole like a movie set here." And then he started asking around if anyone had a bank heist script, and Roger Avary said, "I do," even though he didn't. And then he sat down and blasted out a script in like a week or two, and that turned into Killing Zoe, which he directed himself.
Oh, I did not know that backstory to it. I looked up a little bit of the backstory and I have some thoughts depending on the well, we'll get into it. I have some thoughts on this movie, but I did not know that particular
Yeah.
backstory.
So I guess we'll start with your thoughts. Well, what did you think?
I was not a fan.
What? Really?
I did not enjoy it, but we can get into it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I
I just
love that we have like two in a row now because every movie so far we've agreed on. Now we've this is the second one, but now we've switched our sides. Yeah,
well,
let's hear your thoughts.
so I started watching it. I didn't really know anything about Roger Avary going into it, but as I do whenever I watch a movie, I start watching it and I start wondering who are the people involved in making this. So then I end up looking it up, and so I found Roger Avary, and I read a little bit up about him. So it's complicated. I guess him and Tarantino are kind of frenemies because they worked on some of the earlier scripts together. So I guess that famous story about Tarantino, he was working in a video store and then he made his first film and then it was out of here and so I guess they were working in the same video store together. He was the cinematographer on his first ever short film, and then they'd write back and forth together. So Pulp Fiction, I think, was a pastiche of each different stories from different writers and directors. And then Roger Avary and Quentin Tarantino just ended up coming together afterwards and putting all these little end pieces, essentially like scenes that they'd come up with that didn't fit into anything. They kind of cobbled them into a movie, but they fell out a little bit after Pulp Fiction, I think, because well, Roger Avary claims that Quentin Tarantino stole a lot of his ideas. I think he was like, I wrote a script for this and I gave it to Tarantino to clean up and it turned into True Romance and I never got any credit for it. Or I wrote a script for this and it turned into Reservoir Dogs and I never got credit for it or whatever the fuck. So that kind of colored how I was watching it a little bit, but I gotta say, all right, I'm gonna preface this by saying Quentin Tarantino as a human being leaves a lot to be desired. Leaves a lot to be desired. So I don't doubt that if he was I don't doubt he's the type of person to steal ideas. Quentin Tarantino is a filmmaker, rare, he's up there. He's like in rarefied airs. I don't know if what I saw from Killing Zoe. I don't know if Quentin Tarantino's movies would be worse. I feel like if he was stealing from Roger Avary, because I just feel like Quentin Tarantino. I mean, Killing Zoe to me was it smelled like Reservoir Dogs, but in the way that Reservoir Dogs builds its tension by keeping things at this level and keeping just everything even keeled, and even with the torture scene, it's set to easy listening music. Killing Zoe, everybody's yelling all the time in French, and they're trying to keep the energy up there, but I don't think it executed what he was trying to do. But that was my opinion so far.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's very interesting take on it. I think what happened with him and Tarantino was probably correct. And actually, funny enough, I just checked his IMDb page, Roger Avary, and he's listed as writer on True Romance, but it says uncredited, which means
Yes.
they kind of did that. Someone that got screwed in the past, they
Well,
weren't
they
trying
have a
to add their name
podcast
to it.
together now. They have a movie review podcast
Oh, really? I
together.
didn't even know that.
Yeah, they essentially they do what we do, but I'm gonna say worse. Where they
Oh,
get
but
together and they talk about movies they've seen and they review them and talk about them.
Tarantino and Roger Avary?
Yep. I
Oh,
think it's called the Video Archives.
so they must be good enough friends if they're still
I
doing it.
think yeah, I think they made up 2020 is when the podcast started, so I think that's around when they made up. And
Okay.
the whole
That's good.
premise of the podcast is we are two guys from the video store and we're telling you all about the movies we used to recommend to people when we worked
Oh,
at the
that's kind
video
of
store.
cool. Yeah, I bet you that's kind of what happened is like, especially with Pulp Fiction, they probably kind of wrote it together. But then Tarantino, his career skyrocketed. He became way more famous. And all of a sudden it's like written and directed by Tarantino. And Roger Avary's like, hey man, I wrote a
What the
lot of that
hell?
shit myself. And
Well,
um
I think this is the story I'm picking up here, and like this, like these are things that like I find cool. Like if I had a time machine, I wouldn't go to like Rome or whatever the fuck. Who gives a shit about Rome? I'd go to very specific subcultures where I think the coolest shit is always happening. Like it sounds like Pulp Fiction, like before Roger Avary and Quentin Tarantino, all those guys were famous. They were just a bunch of scumbags living in LA trying to make films. And like there was more than one, or I think they mentioned two or three other names, but there was a bunch of them, a loose collective of just like, hey, you make films, you make films, you make films. And they would all like write these off scenes, these one-off scenes that they didn't feel like fit anywhere, but they'd like, man, I got this cool scene in my head. I just gotta write it down. And so they just throw those into a pile. And then when Tarantino was like out of here, skyrocketed everywhere, they then went back to those collection of scenes, and him and Roger Avary then sat down and were like, "What do we keep? What do we toss? And how do we connect it into a cohesive story?" And like that makes me think of like another one of my favorite subcultures is like mid 2000s New York rap scene where like there were like nobody was paying attention to what was happening there in terms of rap, but there was a bunch of scumbags and like just people in their early 20s and late 30s, and they were just like making music and like being as weird as they possibly could, not in interest of like mainstream success, just being like, we gotta like be as weird as we can and make weird stuff. And the thing that came out of that is like Run the Jewels and LP, and like that it's a big thing at this point. And like that again makes me think of us in Edmonton. Of we're like excuse me calling us all scumbags. I just like using them. Like we're a bunch of scumbags all hanging out, like making movies. We all got ideas, like, and we're like bouncing ideas off of each other. You need to do something. You need to do something, and like it's again like when you look back on these things, I'm sure people in those moments weren't like, this is a thing that's happening. But when you look back on these things and then you see the people that broke out, and like you're just like, man, that was a special time, and like nobody gets left behind. Like even if you're like not a Tarantino, you're a Roger Avary. If you're not Roger Avary, you're I forget the cinematographer on Roger Avary's things, but like like all like I can't connect the thoughts as well as I could, but like a rising tide lifts all boats.
yeah, and I think it just helped. Obviously, Tarantino was the biggest breakout of them. The other guys
Yeah,
kind of rode his coattails a bit, but it
he
is
was
also
like
one of
out.
those things
Yeah,
like we don't know how much he wrote because like even in Grotesque, like some of it, like Julie has some ideas in there, Elizabeth has ideas in there, but
well,
I
that's what
still
happens with
wrote
that.
it, so
Like,
I'm sole writer on it. It's like
but
ideas.
when you have that dynamic, like you're always sitting around, people are bouncing ideas off of each other, things are being thrown out. But then you, as the writer, that like that's just idea forming. That's just throwing things out. The job of the writer is then to take these ideas and form a cohesive
Yeah,
story to it.
that's what writer. A lot of time people think like people outside the industry think that writing is. Yeah, I got this idea for a movie, but it's like that's not writing. It's like someone else can
How
write it. They
many?
would get sole writing credit because just because you have
Can I?
an idea doesn't mean anything. So if
Can
say
I?
if Roger Avary had been like, I got all these ideas for this crime script, and then Tarantino put him in, it's like put him in Pulp Fiction. Well, like that's not a writing credit. Roger Avary wouldn't get a writing credit. However, if he had written a bunch of stuff and Tarantino stole it, okay, well now that's a big problem because
That's a
you're
problem.
taking some writing. But regardless, I find it interesting you didn't like it. I mean, everyone's got a different opinion, but it's like I freaking love it. I haven't like I watched it like probably like 50 times when I was like under 20. It was one of the movies that kind of like made me want to make films. And I've watched it a few times since, but I probably haven't watched it in 10 years or more. But I was like, oh, watch it again. And I was like, oh, I
Well,
think I like it even more than before. It's like I like every second of it.
I
Uh,
did like the, and now we do heroin.
yeah, it's got like so many, even the non like classic lines in it are still like classic lines. Oh,
Ox, where is your yoke? I was like, I was trying to look that up. I guess that's specifically from the movie, but I was like, that sounds like it's a line from something. That's a cool
yeah,
line.
like yeah, even when I first watched, I was like, yeah, what is that? I assumed it must be Shakespeare or something, but according
Same.
to IMDb, like the guy the Oliver at the end when he gets shot and he's dying, and then he that's his last words before he dies. Ox, where is thy yoke? And Roger Avary said he wanted to have it a Shakespeare line, but he didn't feel like looking up something up, so he just made up a line that sounded like it might be Shakespeare. And it's
Hit it
basically
on the mark.
what I take it is that there was an earlier scene where Oliver's talking about some movie or TV show that he's a fan of. Remember, he's like yapping
I
away,
was gonna
and the
bring
guys
that
don't
up.
care.
Have
I
you
was
ever
like,
seen
it's
The
probably a
Prisoner?
line from his like favorite show or whatever, and but it's it's completely fictional, so we don't know what it is.
Well, I was gonna bring that up. So have you ever seen The Prisoner? That's the show that they were talking
Oh,
about.
oh, I haven't.
Do you know the premise of The Prisoner?
No.
Have you ever seen the Simpsons episode, The Computer Wore Menace Shoes, where Homer gets starts a news website and then he gets transported off to an island and they're like, he's number one, he's number six.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, yes.
That is the prisoner. He's an old agent of MI6 or something, and he gets knocked out and he wakes up in an island and he's like number six or something. I forget his number. And like, yeah, everybody else has numbers and they're all there in the island. They don't know what's going on. And like, it's time to find out the whole thing. It was very controversial when it came out. It makes sense that a nerd, like, again, these are these fucking nerds, and I'm a nerd too. I get it. Like, all Quentin Tarantino wants to do is talk about like blaxploitation and like Hong Kong action films, and like Roger Avary, apparently all he wants to do is talk about The Prisoner. Like, they just have watched so much stuff and appreciated so much different stuff because that was a British show. Like, I don't know when it was imported to America, but like I'm sure you'd have to go seek it out. I'm sure they weren't like just showing it in America like when Roger Avary was growing up.
Yeah. One thing I really like about the movie is how it doesn't follow a traditional storyline.
No,
Like it
yeah.
doesn't even really, it's just, it starts off with Zed, Eric Stoltz arriving in Paris, meets his prostitute and spends the night with her. And then, then he meets up with his old friend from childhood. And for the long time, like you don't even realize it's going to be a bank heist movie. It's just him and all his buddies there in France getting high and, partying for the first night. And then the next day they rob a bank, which is really funny because the bank plan was so stupid. There's no way that could have worked. Like that is so idiotic. And I remember when I was in high school, we had some guy that came to talk to the school like at an assembly, and it was something about how to like like go down the correct path in life kind of thing. And this guy was like apparently he like went to prison and when he was younger, and because he was like him and his buddies like robbed a bunch of banks like in Vancouver, and he went to
Mhm.
prison, then he got out, and then he straightened his life
Cool.
out or whatever. So it's kind of like that kind of speech. But he said that like they were all heroin addicts back then, but whenever they were going to rob a bank, they would take like a week or two to kick the habit for that time so they could clear up because they're like it's very serious and you can't go rob a bank
I
when you're
guess you
started
can't
on
be
heroin.
fucked up like doing that, but like
But in this movie, they purposely go out, spend the night just doing crazy drugs, getting all fucked up. So they go rob this bank when they're all like hung over. And it is just so idiotic. And also like they're gonna go in, like shut the bank down, hold everyone hostage while they spend like an hour trying to bust into this vault. Like it's like somehow like and of course they fuck it up like right in this, the Ricardo um who walks in and he's the one that's supposed to like make sure that the concierge doesn't ring the bell, but he waits too. Of course, the concierge is played by Ron Jeremy in a little cameo.
that was a fun
Um,
little
but he
cameo.
just like takes too long to shoot him, basically. So either the guy presses the button, but then they don't know. It's like maybe he triggered the button, but then they start firing guns and things go to shit. So someone called the cops, and it's just like there's no way that plan could have worked. Like it's so. It just seems like it was like a suicide mission where they didn't even care if it really worked. They just wanted to like do it because they was Eric Stoltz even said he's like the movie's about psychopaths. Like these are like somehow these like six, seven guys that are complete psychopaths like found each other, became buddies, and then agreed to do this crazy stunt that was never gonna work. And it just seems like they went in there like just like we're it's like they didn't really think through like we gotta
They're
try not
cowboys
to be caught.
essentially. They're
You
just
know,
like they're cowboys, where they show up and they're like, we're good, we're just gonna like ride or die.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And even at the end, remember when everything's going to shit and the cops are coming in and Eric has his like big trolley full of gold and he's like riding down that elevator to the basement and he's just like, haha, bye guys.
I
It's
got it.
it's like what's he gonna do? Like there's nowhere to go. Like he's obviously not gonna even Zed as they're kind of, taking the gold away, he's like, should we cover this up with something? We can't just walk down the street with a trolley full of gold. And
Like
it's
no,
like, yeah, they didn't plan that out beforehand. Like,
well, you know what? I just thought of this now. I can't believe I didn't even think of this until you just said it. Like both of them have movies with the character Zed, Tarantino and
I wouldn't
Uh,
be surprised if Roger Avary came up with that name and then they just used it in both.
yeah, and the both thing. But like I also just as a technical point, I thought it was also really funny that like Zed is played by Eric Stoltz, but his best friend's character name is Eric, which like I'm sure at one point must have gotten confusing on set. Like, Eric,
Oh
which
yeah,
one?
yeah, Eric. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And then
like
at the end, I think did they so after they get stuck in the thing and everything's gone to shit, and then they just light Eric up, like the best friend. They just like they oh man, they just like light him up at the end.
yeah.
Uh,
That was I've heard people like make fun of that part online because it's so like over the top
it's
stylized
pretty
violence.
crazy.
Because he gets shot like was it however many cops shoot him with their like automatic weapon? He gets shot like 500 times, and he's just standing there getting body riddled with bullets.
They imply he gets HIV in the end.
There is like, well, I think Roger Avery's flat out said no, that's not it. But
Well, I don't think that's how HIV works.
there is like that there is that like theme of AIDS because when they're in the car, when they're getting all fucked up, Eric
I
says to his
have the
dad,
AIDS
he's like I have AIDS from the needle.
from the needle.
So assuming they're all sharing the same needle, they probably all have AIDS. And then Eric
Well,
even says
yeah.
when he's like talking about the prostitute, he's like, a girl like that will give you AIDS. So it's obviously on his mind. And then there's that part when they're all fucked up at the bar. Remember, and Eric's like he can or Zed can barely see, and he looks
Yep.
over and he basically sees his buddy Eric fucking Francois in the bar. So it's like, hey, if they're fucking each other, they're probably gonna get AIDS from that too, and then they're bleeding on each other. So there is that kind of undercurrent. Like
Of like everybody's got AIDS and shit.
yeah, you could see why they're thinking that. And it's like, okay, well, Zed had his buddy bleed all over him, and like Zed was all cut up too. So I don't think
Well,
it's gonna transfer that way,
in
but
that way, I don't think it's transferred in that specific way. I think it really needs to be like fluid on fluid. Like if it's like it's hitting a bullet and it's being exposed to air and stuff, like I don't know, it's like a 1% chance. But you are right; they were probably sharing needles all along, and like I
yeah.
don't know, maybe Zed and Eric shared. I don't know. It's
I don't think Zed did the heroin.
no, yeah,
Or
yeah,
did
he didn't
he
do
like
any heroin
smoked
at
it and they
all.
took those pills or whatever, but
I
um
also like that where they were like, "He's chasing the dragon." The Chinese have been doing it for years. I'm like in my head, I was like, "Did the Chinese have tinfoil?"
yeah, I think maybe they found some other way to do it through like
Oh yeah, I'm sure that is like it's a whole thing, but that he is kind of right about why it's called Chasing the Dragon, but it's a little deeper than that. But like it was a good movie. Like I just again I felt like yeah the drug stuff. Do you know I've always said this. You can always tell who has and like filmmakers who have and who haven't done drugs based on what their films look like and what their films treat drugs like. And I feel like Roger Avary has not taken heroin. He's probably done a lot of cocaine, and maybe that's where his association comes from. But like, it's yeah, it's one of those things. Like a lot of art has been inspired by heroin, and I've seen a lot of art like and heard a lot of music that's been inspired by heroin, that like by people who are like, no, at this point I was actively using heroin while I was making it. And like this movie doesn't quite feel that way, so it kind of feels like a half step in the drug way.
I can see that. Like, I've never done heroin either, but so I couldn't say. But they weren't only on heroin; they were doing all sorts of other shit too, and they were drunk and everything. I found it for the most part. I think it was a quite compared to most movies. I'd say it's a quite accurate portrayal. And there was some weird stuff where he's like looking at the band, and there's like little notes coming out of the like that's obviously like over the top, but just like showing how they're acting, like I don't think they were overdoing it.
No, 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 no.
And even just some of like the blurred vision stuff. It just like
But I think like the idea of like, oh, we're just gonna do a bunch of heroin and then we're gonna go rob the bank and that kind of thing is like
yeah,
where
that was I think this movie it's kind of like a Tarantino movie, like Pulp Fiction, where it doesn't take place in the real world because no like I don't think anyone's stupid enough to do what they did. So they kind of just like in this world it makes sense. And Roger Avary's right. He's like he said he kind of wanted to make like a, I can't remember his phrasing, but he wanted to make an art house movie for like Gen X or something. And it is
Yeah,
like that. It's
yeah.
kind of art film, but it's also like mega, mega violent and has like
Well,
action
it's
parts in
very
it.
French, which yeah, yeah, it's very arty and it's very like life does not matter. But like over the top violence. But like there was also a movement in France at that time, like I believe it was like the new French wave kind of movement that like yeah, these ultra violent action films are coming out of the art house world.
Which is weird because I don't know if it's even a French movie because it was made all like 100% shot in LA,
It was shot in LA, but I
except
assume
for
they
the
were probably.
shots of like outside Paris.
Let me look this up. When did Bismarck came
But I
out?
don't like I don't think Roger Avary's French. Like I think they're
No,
like
no, no, no.
they
I
hired
don't think
French
it.
actors. I don't know why he said it in Paris. Maybe he
Well,
just liked,
because
like
there was a movement. I'm just trying to look it up at the moment.
unless he just liked Julie Delpy and she had a French accent, so he decided to set it there.
Well, okay, so here, that's what I'm looking at. There was a movement that was happening in France called the New French Extremity in film, from the 90s to like the mid 2000s, like 2004, 2005. There was this collection of films that were coming out of France that were kind of like porn and action and like art house films, and they were like very like the one that I saw that was like turned me on to the movement and I kind of became aware of it was one called Besmois, which was like very like hyper crazy, like we're going on a road trip to do some revenge and like kill everybody kind of thing. And like I feel like it's probably not out of the realm of possibility that like Roger Avary saw the new French the movies coming out of the French wave because like those two are film nerds and I'm sure like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he would have been like, you know what? Let me try my hand. Like, I like what this kind of thing. So if they're making this kind of thing, maybe I can get involved and make this kind of thing.
Yeah,
Irreversible is one of the other big ones. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. It's
no.
it's the one that goes backwards. It's these are not enjoyable movies. They're a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
Well, even Killing Zoe was criticized for its violence, and a lot of it, like it's nothing you haven't seen before. Like it's not really any worse than Pulp Fiction. But like some of it, it's like, yeah, it does, especially with this like killing, innocent people in the bank. Like it does get pretty brutal at times. But
Yep.
at other times, like during, the first sex scene with Eric Stoltz and Julie Delpy, and they're cutting in, the movie um Nosferatu, right? They're cutting between the sex scene and
Yep.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
noticed
like,
that.
and I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, or when I was like a teenager, I was like, this is, you know, stupid. I used to always fast forward that part because it's like they're trying to be like all weird artistic for that like one scene, and then it just devolves into like half the movie's like crazy drug use, and then the last half is like crazy bank robbery. It's just such a strange like way to tell the story. Like it doesn't follow the typical like three-act structure. It's just so different. I liked it because of that. But actually, funny that you mentioned it. The guy, the Jean or Gene, who's like, the Chinese have been doing it for years, for centuries. Apparently, his line, he has the line where he's like, if you do it, it will feel like the world is a bubble and you're rubbing up against it like a bad windshield wiper.
I
Apparently,
like that. That was
apparently
good.
that line came when before they shot the movie, that actor and Roger Avary were like hanging out and they were like smoking weed. And I guess that actor got super sick and he was like puking and stuff. And then he said that line. He's like, that's what I feel like. And Roger Avary was like, oh, that's a good line. Like, let's put that in the movie. So
Honestly, that was a really good line.
yeah,
I like that line.
yeah, there's a lot of even watching it back a couple days ago. I was like, yeah, there's so many lines in there that I remember, and I know I love that you don't like it just because it's like an interesting take on it. Because like
Hey,
when I was watching, I was like, there's no way anyone could not like this. Like if you're a fan
whips.
of early Tarantino movies, like I say, it's great. Like even the
I am
action parts
interested
are
to
good, and
I am interested to see the kind of pseudo sequel that they had.
yeah,
Lucky
Lucky Day.
Day.
I'm thinking it's probably I hate going into a movie with assumptions, but I'm assuming it's not as good.
Fair enough. I
I
did see
just
the other films he'd made, and like I did like some one or two of the other films.
well
I think he
he wrote Silent Hill.
yes, which I really enjoyed. I know people feel like it's not a perfect adaptation, but I enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, it's I've never played the video game, so I can't compare, but as a movie, it's
It's
it's definitely
creepy.
it's like a popular, it's a well-liked horror movie. So it
Yes.
shows that he could do horror movies too. But funny enough, also the guy that plays Ricardo, he's the guy. Remember, he's the one that's like telling the joke about the guy that gets out of prison. Remember, he's telling that joke to his buddies, and then he gets shot because he's not paying attention. That
Yep.
guy is our buddy, the main character from Hellraiser Bloodline.
Oh, right. That is right. I was trying to
Yeah,
figure out where I knew him from.
yeah. He looks different because he's got the weird facial hair and stuff. But
Yeah, but I was kind of like, have I seen him in something?
and it's funny, like all those guys, like other than Eric Stoltz, I've never seen them in anything. They've all done other acting, but nothing I've ever seen. But they're all like perfectly cast. I just love like their characters are not developed, and I kind of like movies like that where they don't. It's hard to say like they don't take time to like develop the characters. They just develop them through what they say and do, and that makes
We've
them so much more interesting than giving all of them a backstory.
we've talked about this before. I like it too. I hate nothing will make me walk out of a movie quicker than when a character says, "As you know, I'm
Yeah,
an FBI agent, and your brother was killed in line of duty," or something.
yeah.
Like
They
I can't
or like
stand that.
I think a lot of other directors, they would have taken each of those guys and we would have seen them like they would have had a scene of their own at home or doing something, and then they
Yeah,
get together just to set them up. And it's like I like how they walk in and all the guys are sitting around drinking and doing drugs and hey, these are my friends. And then he's like, this is so and so, and he's like he's from Quebec. This is so and so from UK. This is so and so from Vietnam. And then he's like, that's Jean from who knows and Eric. It's just
and
like
you let their conversation tell you about
yeah,
like the characters. Again, it's called Tarantinoing. It's
yeah.
it's a thing he does where he talks about Oingo Boingo for 5 minutes in a film, but then you learn about the character as they're talking about
Yeah.
Oingo.
And I think it's always better to like I want to always be wanting to know more about him rather than being told, right? Like it's
Yeah,
always like it's so much more interesting. I kind of call it like the Clone Wars thing, like in the first Star Wars film where they mention the Clone Wars, and you don't know what the hell that is, but it sounds cool. It's like, man, I want to know what that is. And now they have
setting it up.
movies about now they have a TV show called that. And as soon as they just story that into the ground, all of a sudden it's like, well, now it's not so interesting because it's not mysterious anymore, right? I kind of want to
Loses
know.
the
It's like, how
speed.
did these guys meet each other? And just the fact that like these psychopaths that are all from different countries somehow all found themselves in Paris, met each other, became buddies, and then decided to like rob this bank. Like it'd be different if they were all like, guys who knew each other from Paris, but it's like they're like this international crew of using your words, scumbags. And it's like, it's just like how do they all come together? But you just never find out. They get a little bit into Eric and Zed's like background when Oliver's like, "How'd you meet Eric?" He's like, "Oh, we were friends when we were like 11, and
Well, yeah.
so yeah, he lived up the street or whatever, and they haven't seen each other since." And I do like how like Zed, he's obviously a bad guy. Like he's basically helping them rob a bank, so he's not a good guy. But I think he just didn't realize like the level of
How why they
crazy
would
they were
get.
because you could tell like when Eric kills that woman in the bank, he's just like, fuck, like he's like, it's not what I signed up for. The only part in the movie, and I've actually read, it's always bothered me since I was like first watched it, and I've actually read just online the last couple of days that other people have a problem with it, is after Zed like sleeps with the Zoe, the prostitute at the beginning, his buddy Eric comes in and he just like grabs the prostitute out of the shower and like roughly throws her out naked into the hall. And Zed just kind of like doesn't stop him.
Doesn't flinch.
And even after like Eric's like he's like, if you like this girl, why didn't you stop me? And Zed's like, well, you're acting like a friggin' psycho. But it just I don't know. That part bothered. It just seems like he would have said something. He would have been like, "Dude, like, chill the fuck out. Like, just let her get dressed
Relax.
and leave." Like, that it just seemed like it was out of character for Zed to like. He has this moment with the prostitute, and then he just doesn't care that he's being all violent with her. But it also shows like that guy that plays Eric. Apparently, they call him like a sensitive French actor, and apparently he's been in all these like kind of French art movies where he plays like leading man roles. And all of a sudden, he's like a friggin' raving psycho. Like that guy was good at playing like
Well,
that guy was off the walls, like nuts.
I'm telling you, I think he tapped into that new French extremity. I think he was probably very interested in what was going on in the art house world in France and like what was coming out of that. And like Because like there is a slight feminist streak in the film too, and that's a big part of the new French Extremity was like this heavy feminist streak in there. So like I want to double down and say yeah, he was probably definitely influenced by what was coming out of France at that
It's
time.
funny. I can kind of see how like you can think it's a feminist angle, but I think it's definitely a guy movie. It's like,
It's a guy movie.
yeah,
Yeah, it has a shade. It has a slight shade of feminism, and it kind
yeah,
of it presents sex work as a neutral thing. It's not trying to make her an evil person because she's a prostitute. Whereas like a lot of movies are very concerned about like making sure you know that she's a good prostitute, not a bad prostitute.
yeah.
And like whereas this one, it's kind of like, no, this is her job.
Well, she even says like she's just doing it to pay.
It's my job. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird too how the movie, like it's called Killing Zoe. So it's about Zoe, this prostitute woman, but she's only
Hmm.
in it at the beginning. And then later on, when they rob the bank, she's like, turns out she actually works at the bank part-time. So she's there. But she's basically just like a hostage until the very, very end when stuff goes down. So she doesn't really play that big of a role in the movie. And honestly, the movie, if you just took her character out, would pretty much play out the
Be the
same.
same.
But
But
I
I
do kind of
mean,
like it, just gives that little bookend to it.
clearly Roger Avery, like, yeah, there must be, he must think that it's like important for, like, her part is important in the film.
Yeah, they named the movie after her.
Yeah.
It's
And then they bookend the movie with her. Like, yeah, he must think it's important to a certain degree.
and it's kind of cool. Like she's one of the few like hostages in the bank that she basically fights back and shoots Eric, gets his gun, and it's funny that like these guys are so incompetent. I think like in their minds like they were just either like addled
We're
with
gonna
drugs or
do
whatever.
it.
They thought that they were like smart and that they were tough because it's like, hey, we got guns and we'll shoot anyone. But the one guy's telling a joke and not paying attention, and then like one of the security guards shoots him because they're not looking, and then Oliver like shoots one of his own guys when things start getting crazy. And then it's like they're just they're so incompetent. And it's like how do they think like the cops wouldn't show up? And then when the cops do show up, they're arguing whether or not it was because someone rang the alarm or because they were shooting the guns and someone heard from outside. And then they don't know how to deal with the police, right? And the one part I find really weird is I never actually understood was which is actually the cover of the DVD that I have is the part where Eric's walking in the basement and then he flicks a cigarette and like this like light and sparks come out of his hand and it's like zing.
Mhm.
And I was like, I always wonder, I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I read the script online and it just says Eric is walking and he performs a magic trick.
So
I
he
was like,
probably had a little like magic trick in his thing.
yeah. So, but it's like, yeah, I don't know what what they thought, but yeah, he just
Yeah.
flicks. Another thing I never understood because right at that part he stops and there's like a good 30 seconds of him sitting there with a weird look on his face, and then he turns around, walks upstairs, and starts shooting. And I read that it was because he can hear whispering because the cops are like, they're in some sort of like
Oh,
they're tunneling under the ground or something, and he could hear them whispering, so he knows that like they're coming in. So he goes up and then he's like, "Don't fuck with me," and then starts going crazy.
interesting. Maybe they could have pumped in the whispering a little bit more.
Yeah, it's I never heard it until this time when I turned it up, and you can actually hear whispering, but I never noticed that
I didn't notice it the
previously.
first time around.
Another interesting part about the script is the part where they first go to Eric's house and they meet all his buddies and they go into his bedroom and they're looking at the schematics of like the bank to talk about
Mhm.
the vaults. In the script, Roger Avery's like they go into his room and it says something like the bed's not made and it's all messy like Quentin Tarantino's bedroom.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a line. That's a hilarious Easter egg. So
Um,
what? Yeah, I assume is this a 10 for you?
no, I'm still gonna say I'm not probably not gonna give any movie a 10, but I'd say I give it a 9.
Okay. All right. This is the most different score we've had. I'd put it at like a 4 or a 5.
Okay. It is like it's one of those even when I first watched it, like I've shown it to like a lot of like friends over the years. And some of them are just like, meh, like whatever, like but some of them are like, fuck that is the coolest movie ever.
I enjoy discussing it because obviously there's a lot going on in the script and in the ideas. Like it makes for a good conversation.
I would honestly, I would love to do like a deep dive with someone who's like a fan of it, because even now that I've seen it so many times, I kind of almost know it by heart. But I just feel like if you just pay attention to all the little part, even the parts where they're just
All the
like in
little
that
Easter
jazz
eggs.
bar, there's just like every line is kind of like, oh, like that has some meaning. Now I get it. Like there's
It's a
so
little
many,
deeper.
there's just so many parts in there that I just like, yeah, I just love like every line of dialogue. And funny enough, I also remember that guy who gets up in the bank and he's like, hey, he's like, I'm an American. This is bullshit. If it wasn't for me, you'd all be speaking German. And then they like shoot him. That
Yeah,
guy is the same guy. I'm pretty, it says he's the one of the cops from Reservoir Dogs. I think he's the guy, remember in the bathroom where he's telling that story about like, I was like, buddy, I am gonna shoot you in the
yep, yep, yep,
face.
yep.
I think that's the same guy.
Which is funny. Do you know when they shot the test footage for that? I think it was Steve Buscemi and Quentin Tarantino that acted out that scene.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I guess anyone watching, if you haven't seen Killing Zoe, give it a watch and
Let us know who you
see
agree
who you
with. Do you
agree with.
think
Yeah, I
it's
kind of like
amazing?
that finally we have a movie where we have different views on.
Or we don't fully like agree either way.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that's it. We'll see everyone next time for the next review.